Okay, Gemini 3.0 is here, and it brings with it a whole bunch of new features from Google, and some of them are kind of fantastic. Today, what we're actually going to look at, instead of looking at how it integrates with search, how great it is on the website, all of the many different things that Google Gemini 3 actually gives us, we're going to look at it from an engineering standpoint. So I'm going to dive into a brand new editor that they released and also compare Gemini CLI just a little bit to Claude Code and Codex CLI to see where their differences really lie. So there's a lot here. I'm going to have to kind of pack it together. I apologize. Let's dive in and take a look at some of the engineering features that they have, especially in this very cool anti-gravity application. It's really worth taking a look. Okay, before we dive into all of this busyness, let me put a TLDR on this for anybody that just wants the answer up front. Definitely Gemini 3, fully worth taking a look at. Okay, I've been having so much fun with this project. I can't wait to share it with you. The first thing I want to talk about very briefly, though, is Antigravity. Antigravity is basically a cursor or Visual Studio Code kind of clone from Google with this release. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you how easy and enjoyable it is to kind of build with. But to do that, I wanted to come up with a completely ridiculous scenario. So let's first take a look at what I did. Okay, so we all have meetings. Well, most of us have meetings. So what I decided to do is I went out to Gemini itself, the Gemini app, using the new 3.0 model, and asked it to create a meeting between a new team that was trying to build a water park on the moon. Obviously, of course. They've already conquered water parks on Earth, so why not the moon? So I had them create a little bit of a transcript here as if they had a meeting discussing it and what they might need to move forward. So I'm just going to capture this information and imagine this was a meeting I had, and now what do I do with it? All right, going very fast. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit open folder, and I will create a new folder in here called Waterslide. Now we're seeing anti-gravity in the way that you would typically see something like cursor. We have the files on the left, kind of agent on the right, and the information in the middle. So first what I'll do here is I'll just create a new file and put our notes in it. All right, very quickly, all I've done is created a meeting notes and put the transcript in there. Save that transcript. I've also created a Gemini file that just says we have a reports folder. If you're asked to save a report, put it in reports. Reason I show this is very often I will use these systems to just read through the notes. Let's say, give me a report of what everybody said. All right, let's see what they come up with these meeting notes. All right, executive summary, team is undecided on the crater. Here's the attractions that they read about. Here's the different people. So it went through and read our notes. No big deal here. This is the kind of thing you've seen if you've said summarize my notes. But what I'm illustrating is being able to do it here within kind of a file environment that it can actually look at source files and do much more than just do something like a summary. And that's really what I want to take on here. Okay, so I've got to share a few things with you that Gemini itself did, meaning the application that you might find on the web. If we come back to the Gemini application, one of the things I had to do is when we were dealing with the transcript, I wanted it inside of a canvas. So I selected canvas down at the bottom and said, hey, can you put this in a canvas? That gives me just that file and it makes it editable two ways, but it also gives me this awesome button in the top. And I really cannot tell you how incredible this button actually is. It's the beginning, it's not the end. This is our first step into these kinds of things. This and having the power of Gemini 3 as a coding model behind it really puts vibe coding on steroids in some ways. So if you select this create, you'll see that they have several items here. Web page infographic, quiz, flashcards, audio overview, all awesome, by the way, or even describe your own app. Now, this would be the way to quickly vibe code a single page version of something, which is great. What I wanted to show you is I did a few of those items that they had selected there that I could automatically select, like infographic. If we select the infographic and take a look at it, this is the outcome just of the meeting notes. If you have a meeting and you put it into Gemini and you say, give me an infographic, then what you get is kind of a read through. It does this analysis. Of course, you can give it more information on what you want it to look at, but this is what it came up with. And it came up with which parts were discussed, the order, the critical path, but also critical risk. What things are critical risks in this conversation, which pretty much is everything. So really, really a wonderful kind of readout of the just meeting notes. This is just from a transcript. And then I kept going and said, okay, let's do an interactive report with it and see what you can come up with. And it came back and said, okay, we'll take a look. Heavy lift rocket is uncommissioned. Grand opening target 2028, which is great. What are our risk areas? Physics seems to be our number one risk area. Safety is also our number one risk area. That kind of tracks. The meeting focus, what did the meeting talk about when they were talking? Well, of course, they talked about logistics some, but the most they talked about, like any one of our meetings, was the attractions. And then down here is all of the tasks that were discussed inside of the meeting, but you can also take a look at the problems that it identified. And so what problems did we bring in? Tycho's too jagged for the prefab shell, water slides, low G forms aggressive globules and won't stay in the flumes. So there's a lot of problems here that they had in this readout, and then they have the full transcript below. And I thought, boy, this is really a great way of just exploring notes that you might have. So I want to highlight that you can do a lot of the stuff that we're about to go build. We're not going to build these things. We're going to build something a little bit more than this down in Antigravity. But I wanted to show you that this stuff is really stepping forward, and using 3.0 as the coding model behind all of this really ends up being a major unlock. So what we're going to do is build a quick application. What I want to be able to do is kind of figure out what order the work needs to be done in and use an application to be able to do that we can move things around. Let's see if we can do that. I need to take the transcript and turn all of the items that need to be done on our list into a data set. I'm interested in keeping. Okay, great. It's gone through our file. It's torn out all of the different things that it thinks need to be done from our meeting notes. By the way, this is how you might pull together things that you're discussing in a meeting that are action items. You've seen that, but maybe there's just other ideas that you also want to pull out, or points of contention or risks. Those kinds of things you can ask these systems to say, go create some data for me. And this data can be used in a whole myriad of ways. You can see that our agent is here cooking away for us, of course. I'm going to go into what they call the agent manager. What you can start to see is the different applications, or what they call workspaces, that I've already opened in this system. If I look into it, I can look at the historical requests. This is the data set that we just created. So if we look in here, you can see all of the actions that occurred. It's just historical. But if we look at the one that's working away, you can actually watch it while it works. Now, the neat thing about that is this window back here is no longer actually needed. So it will keep running in the background if you ask it to, and this will continue to work. Now, one of the things that it allows us to do is to create more tasks here. So if I wanted to, I could ask another question of this project, essentially, and allow it to cook at the same time. Now, that same time, I'll say the contention there, this is not yet a Git repo, so this will run, and they will run in contention with one another, as you might expect. So I would say mileage may vary. What I would do here is be able to go to a different application and say, oh, let me take a look at this and ask a question for this application if I like, and say something like that. Now I've kicked off another request without opening the whole project, having another project window, all of those other things. This, by the way, is all local. So this is not cloud-based. It looks a lot like the cloud-based solution, but it's actually running all local. It is, though, isolated within this experience. So I'm not overwhelmed with a whole bunch of different project folders or files and things of that nature. I can come back over here and just take a look and see how our Moon Mission Task Explorer is getting on. It looks like it's trying to run the server and run some verifications. So all of this is kind of all working together in concert, and it allows you to get to a coordination level. And very excellent. Now we get to talk about something else that Antigravity has, which is one of its superpowers. It comes baked in with a way to control Chrome, and it knows how to, as you can see, move around on the screen, do different things. So it's directly interacting with Chrome to kind of run all the test cases that need to be run. Really very excellent. While Antigravity is kicking away here trying to figure this out, let's drop down into Gemini CLI for just a second to take a look at one of the things it can do. I did an exploration and kind of a comparison of Claude, Codex, and Gemini CLI, and it was kind of telling. So I have a repo here that has multiple audio files that play at random, and I want to kind of get a sense of whether or not that randomness is correct. My feeling is it might not be working. Can it go make sure? All right, what you can see here is we have Claude in the front. We're going to issue off this command, and it's saying we're in Thanksgiving, and it sure feels like we're only hearing 3 of the 6 jingles. And then there's Codex here in the middle. We're going to issue that off. And what I wanted to show you in Gemini, which is interesting, it's not just about this evaluation. They have a very nice way of being able to save your chats. So if I do /chat, you'll see that there's a couple options. There's list, save, resume, delete, and share. So when I do list, you'll see that test random shows up here. This was a previous conversation. And this is the one that I'm actually running in the other 2 systems right now. I happened to run it in Gemini myself just off the cuff, and it was so good that I thought, let's test the other 2 and let them run. But what we'll do here is we'll do /chat, resume, test random. And that will give us this example here that we can come back and take a look at what happened in that conversation. But first, let's see how the other two do. What I will say for what Claude did is very quickly took a look, read through the files, it looked through the music config, it looked at the theme provider that it found very quickly, it realized that all 6 files were there, and then it took a look and realized that there was a test file that you'll see that it looked for here, which is what Gemini had created, which is awesome, but it gives us a really great output. And this is kind of a hallmark of Claude. So it's saying, why you're hearing only 3 of 6, this is the coupon collector's problem. With pure random selection from 6 options, you'd statistically need 15 page loads or so to likely hear all 6. After just 6 loads, there's about a 35% chance you've missed at least 3 jingles. So I think they're doing a great job of kind of also basically as another engineer being able to say, well, it really depends on how many times you've loaded it. Just understand that that randomness may not really take hold until you've loaded it enough times. I think that's a nice way, especially if you're kind of new to these environments, that it will walk you in. It's a very clear example of the way Claude likes to help people understand the context of the problem. And Codex is back here simply trying to solve the problem itself. And so what it's doing is it's going into the theme provider. It's already making changes, which is unfortunate because it doesn't need to make changes. That's going to be a problem. We'll have to look into that and see what their output here is. Okay. I mean, I don't hate their implementation. So what Codex is deciding to do is to attack the problem of perception to some degree. So it's saying what I'm going to do is go and not make it necessarily random. I'm going to rotate the audio player component so that manual clicks rotate the holiday music so that you'll be able to hear them. It kind of defeats the whole concept of random, but okay, I get that it feels like I gave them the problem of it feels like this is not giving me the random selection of music. And they said, fine, if you want to hear them all, we'll randomize a playlist for you or something. So in the end, they say they added a per holiday shuffle bag, okay, that persists in local storage. So all Thanksgiving jingles are rotated evenly and the bag refills every full cycle. Also exposed rotate holiday music via context. So I would say this is solving the problem, which by the way is not a problem, with more engineering. A little bit of a problem. And again, what did Claude tell us? It's saying, leave it. It's a statistical norm for this to occur. You won't necessarily hear everything, but we looked at everything and it feels like it should be rotating them. So this one's great, right? It's really leading us directly into it. But here's what I'll do. When we resumed this conversation in Gemini, which by the way is absolutely the best out of all of these, it does not do as clear a description as Claude. By the way, I'm still going to tell you that Claude will hold your hand much more frequently. It is very nice in that way. But what you're seeing here is a pretty good write-up. So I would say the Gemini model is really close to Claude in so many ways, and this is another one. So it's saying that it verified that there are 1 through 6 files, and if I can tell you what it did, because the history that they save in these conversations doesn't actually record everything that happened in that session, it went through and it verified all the places that it was called, made sure that the engineering was right, that makes sense, made sure the count was right, Then it went and made sure that the MD5s, basically a little signature on each one of the files, was different, so that actually all of those different files were actually different files. Nobody else took this effort, because I easily could have duplicated the same file over, given it a new file name, and that would give me a perception of hearing the same jingle, but the random system could be playing different file names. So I thought that was a brilliant move that they took on. And then the next thing that they did was write a system here, and I'm just going to ask them to run it. They wrote a test case to actually verify this themselves. So I'm going to just ask it to kind of execute that test case again so that we can see the outcome. And you'll see that it actually runs these test cases, and it figures out that there is a statistical distribution, that it is going through the randomness, and it confirms that all 6 are used, around 16.6%. So really great work. And I would say this one I have to absolutely give to Gemini. This was a great example of how Gemini is actually a little bit different. I don't know that I can quantify what this is, but it covered the ground. It believed me. It went and validated much more than I would have done by hand, more than likely, and then wrote a full test case to support it. Admittedly, Claude did a great job of describing it to me, and you'll notice in here that it said, oh, I see that you've already written a test case. Let me go run it. That's the test case that Gemini had run. I had moved it out of the way by the time Claude was supposed to execute this request. I didn't think that it would find it, but it did. So it was trying to run the test case. So really all the applause to Claude here. And what did Codex do? It built more engineering. In fact, I'm a little frustrated enough with what Codex did here. I want to ask Codex, does this prevent things from being random? Let's see how it feels about that. Okay, so we can see clearly they came up with actually a pretty good fully rolled random collection that it writes to a file, that it will play through that list and then re-randomize another list. So it will be random, to be fair, except it's kind of ordered randomness, which would mean it's going to play all 6, which means I'm not going to hear the same jingle 3 times in a row, which is how random works. So I don't know that I necessarily agree with this is avoiding back-to-back repeats within a cycle. That's what random would be. So I will say this answer does not match my expectation of the question. And not to mention, it makes it more complicated because we have more engineering. Okay, so at some point, we saw that it was trying to drag the UI. I wanted to take a look at our build for a second here again. It was trying to drag the UI. It came back and said, okay, everything's good. I've created all of this and it works just fine. If we look at its walkthrough, that's one of those artifacts we were seeing in the other window. If we look through the walkthrough, we can see what it attempted to do. And here it will say the app correctly loads and displays the task list, drag and drop. The drag and drop interface is implemented. And we know that we saw it attempting to drag this, but it actually selected it. There's also an error down here that's a problem. So I want to tell him about these things. There's this awesome review button up here. If I click review, I can drag a little square around this, which gives me a comment, and I can say, this is an error for Next.js, and add that comment, and then I can come to this. Drag and drop actually did not work. As you can tell, while you were dragging, it was just selecting the text on the screen and that. And so now I have these 2 reviews in here, and I can click the review button up at the top and say, I don't think we actually finished everything. And then that will go in as marked up screenshot that it took, which is kind of fantastic. This is something that we struggle with very often. This is really one of those great values of them having Chrome and being able to directly interact with it and then giving us tools to use what they're giving us back as screenshots, not just proof. Okay, this is great so far. I've created another request here on Waterslide by just coming back here and going into that. And what we're asking it to do is kind of allow us to be able to drag things in a Gantt chart way. Let's see how that goes. Oh my goodness. It's still working away, but this just popped into view and I just had to share it. This is one of the things I've seen with Gemini 3 several times. There are a few scenarios where it has blown me away with UI, and that's saying something. So excellent, excellent work. Left alone, given no instruction, it'll give us that previous UI we saw. Given just a little opportunity to be creative, come on. Oh no. Okay, I'm a little heartbroken. It's great. You'll get everything that I was hoping you'd be able to get out of this. But you can see here that my model quota limit was exceeded. So I'm stuck. I can select another model, which is something that they offer. I can come in here and choose Gemini, Claude, and even GPT-OSS, which is the local open source version of GPT 4.0 or oh 03, actually. So I am out of Gemini 3 Pro high and low credits for the moment, which is pretty unfortunate, but that means I guess we should take a look at what it built for us. All right. So here we are on the mission timeline. If you recall, we started in this place where you could drag these items up and down on the list and take a look at all of the tasks that we had to getting our notes in order. But then I built a Gantt chart out of it that allowed us to kind of look at things from a Gantt chart view, that we might be able to see when things should get done or can get done. This is kind of fantastic. So what's most impressive and most important to understand about this is, in the end, all we're looking at, if we come back here and open the editor itself, all we're looking at is our notes. We started with a transcript of a meeting. And I want to illustrate that very clearly. If you have transcripts and you have information and you're planning or you're thinking or you're kind of trying to ideate with stuff, there are a lot of opportunities for these tools to be able to build within the folder that has your notes. There's nothing special that has to be done. I just created a new folder called Planning App and told it in the Gemini, I have an app. It's going to be in this thing called Planning App. And every time I talk to you about the app, put stuff in there. And so Planning App created the data that we created. I showed you how to do that. And it's now updating this file. So this is my source of truth of all of the different changes that I might make. I can then take this file later and put it into any new application or use it some other way, or give it to an LLM and say, give me a readout on what we should be doing, create kind of a report on how we should move forward, blah, blah, blah. So this stuff is so powerful when used together, and not think of it as building an application is only for external users. I use these kinds of apps myself pretty frequently. I build apps for myself around a context that I'm looking at so that I can better understand it and move the parts around inside of it. I cannot highly enough advise this, but we have got to talk about both Antigravity and Gemini 3. Oh, wait, I didn't even show you. Look, we created an official website. So just from our notes, just from the transcript, I decided to get a website built. So here it is. Gemini just went out and built this. Works just fine. Kind of fantastic. I also had it create a brochure. Here's our brochure. So this one is supposed to have an image in the background, and then here's the brochure, the things that we will be offering. Again, this is literally just from meeting notes. Where these things are taking us is amazing. I think this is a great example. They just have these tools inside of the Gemini app itself as quick vibe code solutions, but they are creating really, really wonderful stuff. And in the end, we do have the final screenshot here of what they believe our application, or what they believe our water slide on the moon will look like, including all of the warning signs of the different things that happen, like the water globules that'll kill you and the ice shrapnel slushies. So I thought this was just too much fun to not share. So Gemini 3 just killed it for me. Antigravity, I want to continue to use that application. I would put it at near the top of my list. It might be at the top of my list. I'm very interested in working in kind of that agent view and not necessarily in the project view, and getting used to that a little bit more frequently. That's been great use. The use of browser is fantastic, especially in my case. I do a lot of things from a browser standpoint. So I would definitely say, I guess I'm advising buy or something. Go get a $10 a month subscription as fast as you can to be able to get a little bit more use out of these tools, and push them on things that are not just a vibe code app that you build or some kind of game that you want to give it a shot. Use something that you do every day. You have a pantry and you want to reorganize it, take a picture, give it to Gemini 3 and say, here's my pantry. Tell me what I've got. Reorganize it for me. Build kind of a system for me to manage it. I don't know. Come up with some crazy stuff. I will say I didn't expect this to be my outcome. I've been playing with Gemini 3 for multiple days now, and progressively it's sticking to me, which I really didn't anticipate. So I hope these findings actually kind of give you a new view into it, at least my view into it. Thanks for coming along for the ride on this one, and I'll see you in the next one.